porcelain shattered against polished hardwood, echoing like a gunshot through the hushed dining room of the city's most exclusive restaurant. Gasps rippled across tables draped in heavy white linen. There stood Chloe, a waitress barely holding her fractured life together, frozen in absolute terror as a furious socialite screamed for her immediate termination and arrest. Humiliation burned her cheeks while the cowardly manager rushed forward to toss her out into the freezing rain. All hope seemed to evaporate, her fate sealed by a single, malicious, false accusation. Yet, from the shadows of a secluded corner booth, a solitary figure slowly rose to his feet. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden, unforgiving glow over the main dining room of Laura, a restaurant so steeped in exclusivity that reservations were traded like illicit currency. For Chloe Bennett, this glittering sanctuary of the elite was merely a battlefield. She navigated the narrow spaces between the velvet-upholstered chairs with practiced precision, balancing a silver tray holding 3 flutes of vintage champagne and a delicate plate of truffle-infused caviar. Every step she took was calculated. Every smile she offered was meticulously manufactured. She had to be perfect. The medical bills for her younger sister, Harper, stacked on her kitchen counter at home, were a constant, suffocating reminder of what was at stake. Harper's treatments for a rare neurological condition were draining Chloe's meager savings faster than she could replenish them. Laura paid exquisitely well in tips, but it demanded a piece of her soul in return. Tonight, the restaurant was at capacity, thrumming with the low, arrogant murmur of old money and new tech wealth. At table 4 sat Mrs. Beatrice Sterling, a woman whose reputation preceded her like a dark, expensive cloud. Beatrice was the wife of a prominent real estate developer and possessed a temper as sharp as the diamonds adorning her throat. She was currently on her 3rd dry martini, her speech slightly slurred, her gestures broad and erratic. She wore a vintage cream-colored silk dress that she had already loudly announced to the entire waitstaff cost more than their combined annual salaries. Chloe approached table 4 with a bowl of steaming lobster bisque, her hands perfectly steady despite the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. "Your bisque, Mrs. Sterling," Chloe said, her voice soft and deferential, maintaining the strict eye-level protocol the restaurant demanded. "Finally!" Beatrice snapped, not looking up from her phone. "I was beginning to think you had to sail to Maine to catch the wretched thing yourself." Chloe offered a polite, practiced apology and moved to set the bowl down on the table. What happened next occurred in a fraction of a second, yet it would replay in Chloe's mind for years to come. Beatrice, animatedly arguing with someone over her phone, abruptly threw her hands up in exasperation. Her diamond-encrusted wrist collided violently with the edge of the heavy porcelain bowl just as Chloe was lowering it. The bowl tipped. A wave of rich, orange broth cascaded over the edge of the table, splashing directly onto the lap of Beatrice's priceless silk dress. For a single heartbeat, the dining room went dead silent. The string quartet in the corner seemed to miss a note. Then, Beatrice screamed. It was a shrill, piercing sound that shattered the sophisticated ambiance of Laura into a million pieces. She leaped up from her chair, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You stupid, clumsy wretch!" Beatrice shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Chloe. "Look what you've done! Look at my dress!" "Mrs. Sterling, I am so incredibly sorry," Chloe gasped, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She immediately grabbed a stack of crisp linen napkins, stepping forward to help absorb the scalding liquid. "Please let me help! Don't you dare touch me with your filthy hands!" Beatrice recoiled as if Chloe were carrying a plague. The socialite's eyes darted frantically to her wrist, and suddenly her expression shifted from mere anger to a predatory realization. "My bracelet," she gasped, her voice rising an octave. "My diamond tennis bracelet, it's gone." Chloe froze, the napkins dangling from her trembling fingers. "Ma'am? It was on my wrist a second ago," Beatrice yelled, her gaze sweeping over the floor before locking onto Chloe with a venomous glare. You spilled that soup on purpose to distract me. You stole my bracelet." No, I swear to you, I didn't touch anything," Chloe pleaded, taking a step back. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pale and trembling. She could feel the stares of 100 wealthy patrons burning into her skin. They were judging her, finding her guilty by virtue of her uniform. Arthur Harrison, the general manager of Laura, materialized from the shadows with the speed of a panicked rat. Harrison was a sycophant of the highest order, a man who built his career on kissing the rings of the wealthy while treating his staff like disposable commodities. He took one look at Beatrice's ruined dress and the tears of rage streaming down her face, and his decision was made before he even heard the full story. "Mrs. Sterling, please, breathe," Harrison said, his voice dripping with honeyed concern as he positioned himself between Beatrice and Chloe. "What has happened here?" This thief poured hot soup all over me and unclasped my bracelet in the chaos," Beatrice declared, playing the victim with theatrical perfection. $100,000 piece, Arthur. Gone." Harrison turned slowly to Chloe. The obsequious smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of sheer disgust. "Chloe, empty your apron. Now." "Mr. Harrison, please, you know me," Chloe begged, her voice cracking. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she fought them back, refusing to cry in front of this audience. "I've worked here for 2 years. I would never do such a thing." She hit the bowl with her own arm. "Are you calling me a liar?" Beatrice screeched. "Empty the apron," Harrison barked, his face turning an angry shade of puce. With shaking hands, Chloe turned her black apron pockets inside out. Out tumbled a cheap ballpoint pen, a wine key, and a small notepad. Nothing else. "She probably slipped it to an accomplice or hid it in her uniform," Beatrice sneered, adjusting her ruined dress. "I want the police called. I want her strip searched, and I want her fired immediately." Harrison didn't hesitate. "Chloe, you are terminated. Effective this very second. Get out of my dining room before I have security drag you out by your hair. And pray Mrs. Sterling doesn't press charges. I will be calling the authorities to wait for you at the back exit." Chloe stood paralyzed, fired, arrested. The words echoed in her mind, drowning out the murmurs of the dining room. If she lost this job, if she went to jail, Harper would be evicted. Harper would lose her treatments. The terrifying weight of it all crushed the breath from her lungs. She looked around the room, searching for a single sympathetic face among the sea of cold, judgmental eyes. There was no one. She was entirely alone, about to be thrown to the wolves. "I said get out!" Harrison roared, stepping forward to grab her by the arm. But before his hand could make contact with her uniform, a voice cut through the tension. It was not a loud voice, but it carried a weight and a quiet authority that instantly commanded the attention of every soul in the room. "Take your hand off her, Arthur." The silence that followed was absolute. Arthur Harrison froze, his hand suspended in midair. He slowly turned his head toward the source of the command. Sitting in the dimly lit corner booth, table 22, historically reserved for the restaurant's most discreet and powerful clients, was a man. He had been quietly dining alone all evening, an open laptop beside his perfectly seared Wagyu steak. He closed the laptop with a soft, definitive click and stood up. He was tall, impeccably dressed, in a bespoke charcoal suit that spoke of old, quiet money, completely devoid of flashy labels. His dark hair was neatly styled, but it was his eyes that commanded the room, a piercing, icy grey that seemed to calculate the exact worth of everything they rested upon. This was Silas Thorne. Wait, Silas was the name he used in European circles, but locally, in the ruthless world of high-stakes corporate acquisitions, he was known simply as Nathaniel Pierce. A venture capitalist and a phantom in the social pages, Nathaniel was a man who owned half the city's commercial real estate, though his name rarely appeared on the deeds. Nathaniel stepped out of the booth, his movements unhurried, almost lazy, as he crossed the dining room. The patrons instinctively parted for him, sensing the predatory confidence radiating from his posture. "Mr. Pierce," Harrison stammered, his face instantly draining of color. I apologize for the disturbance. This employee has just assaulted one of our premier guests and stolen a valuable piece of jewelry. I am handling it." Nathaniel stopped a few feet away, entirely ignoring Harrison. Instead, his grey eyes settled on Chloe. He saw the tremble in her hands, the tear-stained cheeks, and the absolute desperation radiating from her posture. He then shifted his gaze to Beatrice Sterling, who was standing with her arms crossed, looking incredibly indignant. "A premier guest," Nathaniel repeated, his voice smooth, akin to silk drawn over a blade. "Mrs. Sterling, I presume?" Beatrice scoffed, trying to regain her footing. "I don't know who you are, but this is none of your business. This girl is a thief." "My business, Mrs. Sterling, is the truth," Nathaniel said calmly. He reached into the breast pocket of his suit and withdrew his smartphone. "You see, I have a rather demanding board of directors in Tokyo. I was quietly recording a video brief for them regarding a new acquisition while I dined. My camera was angled toward the center of the room." Beatrice's haughty expression faltered for a fraction of a second. "I don't care what you were recording." Nathaniel ignored her, tapping the screen of his phone. "Let's review the tape, shall we?" He held the phone up so Harrison could see the screen. Though the rest of the dining room couldn't see the tiny display, they hung on Nathaniel's every word. "Ah, there you are, Mrs. Sterling," Nathaniel narrated coolly. "Arguing on the phone, very animated. There comes the waitress, approaching perfectly from your blind side, adhering to Laura's service protocols. She lowers the bowl, and... oh, there." Nathaniel paused the video and looked directly at Beatrice. "It appears, Mrs. Sterling, that in your frustration you threw your arm back, striking the bowl yourself. The waitress didn't spill the soup. You did." That's a lie. It's an optical illusion," Beatrice stammered, her face turning as red as the spilled bisque. "High-definition video rarely lies," Nathaniel replied dryly. "But let us address the more serious accusation. Grand larceny. You claim she unclasped your bracelet during the commotion." Nathaniel resumed the video. "Let's look at your left wrist as you stand up to scream at the poor girl. Zooming in. Fascinating." Nathaniel held the phone closer to Harrison's face. The manager was sweating profusely now, his eyes wide with panic. "Arthur, tell the room what you see on Mrs. Sterling's wrist after the soup has been spilled," Nathaniel instructed. Harrison swallowed hard. The bracelet, it's still on her wrist." Gasps erupted from the surrounding tables. Beatrice took a step back, her hands flying to her hips. "This is absurd. It's gone now." "Indeed it is," Nathaniel said, stepping closer to Beatrice. His height and presence seemed to shrink the aggressive socialite. "Perhaps, Mrs. Sterling, when you reached into your oversized Hermes Birkin bag to retrieve your lipstick just moments before I stood up, the clasp, which you have notoriously complained about to your jeweler on Fifth Avenue, gave way. I suggest you look inside your bag." Beatrice stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. "How do you know about my jeweler?" "I know a great deal about a great many things," Nathaniel said softly, his tone laced with a subtle menace. "Check the bag, Beatrice." Trembling, Beatrice grabbed her handbag from the adjacent chair. She aggressively dug through the silk lining. A metallic clink sounded, and her hand froze. Slowly, agonizingly, she pulled out a glittering diamond tennis bracelet. The dining room erupted into chaotic murmurs and whispers. Beatrice Sterling had just been caught in a vicious, irrefutable lie. "Well," Nathaniel said, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "It seems the only thing stolen here tonight was this young woman's dignity." Beatrice looked around, realizing she was now the pariah of the room. Humiliated, outed, and staring down a room full of her peers who were already drafting text messages to their gossip circles, she grabbed her ruined coat. Without another word, she practically sprinted for the front doors, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and shattered reputation in her wake. Chloe let out a breath she felt she had been holding for an eternity. Her legs suddenly felt like lead, and she reached out, gripping the back of a dining chair to keep from collapsing. Harrison, realizing the catastrophic error he had just made, immediately pivoted. He turned to Chloe, plastering on a fake, sickly sweet smile. "Chloe, my deepest apologies. It appears I acted hastily. You know how high the pressure is here. Of course, you are not fired. Why don't you take 10 minutes in the break room, catch your breath, and then we'll get you back on the floor." Nathaniel turned his imposing gaze upon the manager. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Arthur," Nathaniel said, his voice deadly quiet. "Did I hear you correctly? You are offering her her job back?" "Yes, Mr. Pierce. A simple misunderstanding," Harrison babbled, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "There is no misunderstanding," Nathaniel said. "You were willing to throw an innocent woman to the police without a shred of investigation, merely to appease a wealthy bully. You displayed a profound lack of leadership, integrity, and basic human decency." "Sir, I was protecting the restaurant." "You don't own the restaurant, Arthur," Nathaniel interrupted. "You manage it. Or rather, you managed it." Harrison blinked, confusion washing over his panic-stricken face. I don't understand. I am the silent majority shareholder of the Vanguard Hospitality Group, which holds the lease and the operating licenses for Laura," Nathaniel stated, his voice ringing with absolute finality. "And as of this exact moment, you are terminated. Clear out your office. If you are still on these premises in 15 minutes, I will have security toss you into the alley." Harrison stood dumbfounded, his career disintegrating before his eyes. He opened his mouth to argue, saw the merciless resolve in Nathaniel's grey eyes, and snapped his mouth shut. Defeated, the manager slunk away toward the back corridors. Nathaniel turned back to Chloe, who was staring at him as if he were an apparition. The fierce, terrifying aura that had surrounded him moments ago seemed to soften almost imperceptibly as he looked at her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice dropping to a gentler, private register. Chloe nodded slowly, though tears were finally beginning to spill over her lashes. I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life tonight. I need this job more than anything." "You don't need this job," Nathaniel corrected her gently. "In fact, you no longer work here." Chloe's heart stopped. Had he just saved her only to fire her anyway? "What?" "But you just—" Nathaniel smiled, a small, genuine expression that transformed his severe features. A woman who can maintain her composure under that kind of assault, who can hold her ground against monsters in silk dresses without losing her dignity. She is wasted carrying soup to ungrateful snobs. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, matte black business card, holding it out to her. "My car is waiting outside," Nathaniel said. "Get your coat, Chloe Bennet. We have a great deal to discuss." The interior of Nathaniel Pierce's Maybach was a world away from the chaotic kitchen of Laura. It smelled of rich leather and subtle cedar wood. Rain lashed against the tinted windows, blurring the neon lights of the city into streaks of crimson and gold, but inside the cabin, it was profoundly silent. Chloe sat rigidly on the plush leather seat, clutching her cheap woolen coat around her uniform. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation was beginning to crash, leaving her exhausted and painfully aware of her surroundings. She felt entirely out of place, a street sparrow trapped in a golden cage. Nathaniel sat opposite her, pouring a measure of amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 heavy glasses. He handed one to Chloe. "Drink," he instructed gently. "It will help with the shock." Chloe took a hesitant sip. The liquid was smooth, burning a warm path down her throat and steadying the tremors in her chest. She looked up at the man who had just dismantled her entire reality and pieced it back together in the span of 10 minutes. "How did you know my last name?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Inside the restaurant, you called me Chloe Bennet." Nathaniel swirled the liquid in his glass, leaning back into the shadows of the cabin. "I make it my business to know the people who work in my establishments, Miss Bennet. Even the ones who think they are invisible." He pressed a button on the console, and a digital display descended from the ceiling, illuminating the dim space with a soft blue light. On the screen was a dossier. Her dossier. Chloe's eyes widened as she saw her own photograph, her employment history, and beneath it, medical records detailing Harper's illness. "You've been investigating me?" Chloe asked, a spark of defensive anger finally cutting through her fear. "Why?" "Because for the last 3 weeks, I have been looking for a very specific type of person," Nathaniel explained calmly, unfazed by her anger. "I needed someone intelligent, highly observant, capable of blending into the background, and most importantly, someone under immense pressure who possesses an unbreakable moral compass. You, Chloe, check every single box." "I serve food, Mr. Pierce. I don't know what kind of twisted corporate game you're playing, but I'm not a spy or a genius. I'm just trying to keep my sister alive." "And you are doing a phenomenal job of it," Nathaniel countered, his voice softening, with a strange, genuine respect. "You work 60 hours a week here. You work another 20 at a bookstore. You sleep on an uncomfortable sofa, so your sister can have the bedroom with the humidifier. You are fiercely loyal. That is exactly why I need you." Chloe set the glass down on a small built-in tray, crossing her arms. "Need me for what?" Nathaniel turned off the screen, plunging them back into the intimate gloom of the car. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The wealthy, aloof businessman was gone, replaced by a man who looked suddenly burdened. "A year ago, my mentor and former business partner, Elias Montgomery, died under highly suspicious circumstances," Nathaniel began, his tone grave. "The police ruled it a heart attack. I know for a fact it was not. Before he died, Elias was on the verge of exposing a massive money-laundering syndicate operating through the city's highest-end hospitality groups, specifically a rival firm known as the Apex Syndicate." Chloe listened, captivated despite herself. This sounded like something out of a pulp thriller, not the reality of a Tuesday night in November. "Apex is ruthless," Nathaniel continued. "They've bought off politicians, police and regulators. I have been slowly building a shadow case against them, trying to find the ledger that proves their guilt. But I hit a wall. Their CEO, a man named Sterling," Chloe gasped. Sterling? As in Beatrice Sterling? Her husband, Richard Sterling, Nathaniel confirmed with a dark nod. The very same. Now you understand why I took such distinct pleasure in humiliating his wife tonight. Richard operates out of the penthouse suite at the Grand Meridian Hotel. It is a fortress. My traditional operatives can't get within 100 yards of the executive floors without setting off alarms. And you think I can? Chloe asked incredulously. I don't think. I know, Nathaniel said, because the Grand Meridian just contracted a new third-party vendor for their VIP private dining services, a company I quietly own. We provide the waitstaff for the executive suites. The realization hit Chloe like a physical blow. She understood now. She understood the scrutiny, the test at the restaurant, the reason he had stepped in. You want me to go in as a waitress, Chloe whispered. An invisible girl carrying a silver tray, Nathaniel agreed. People like Richard Sterling don't look at the help, Chloe. Tonight proved that. To them, you are part of the furniture. You hear their conversations, you see their documents, you access their private spaces, and they never give you a second thought. He reached into a leather briefcase beside him and pulled out a thick manila envelope, tossing it onto the seat beside her. Inside is a contract. It officially makes you an executive consultant for my primary firm. The salary is $500,000 a year, with full premium medical coverage for your sister, Harper, effective immediately. All her treatments, all her specialists, covered in full, indefinitely. Chloe stared at the envelope. It represented everything she had been agonizing over, everything she had been praying for in the dark, quiet hours of the night when Harper was crying from the pain. It was salvation. And if I am caught? Chloe asked, her voice trembling slightly as she looked from the envelope back to Nathaniel's icy eyes. You won't be, Nathaniel said with absolute conviction, because I will personally train you. For the next 2 weeks, you will learn how to read a room, how to bypass digital locks, and how to extract information without leaving a footprint. You will become the most dangerous woman in this city, Chloe Bennett. The car rolled to a smooth stop. Chloe looked out the window and realized they were parked outside her modest apartment building. The rain was still falling, washing the grime from the city streets. She looked at the man in the bespoke suit. He was offering her a deal with the devil, a plunge into a dangerous world of corporate espionage, billionaires and criminals, but he was also offering Harper a future. Chloe picked up the envelope. It felt incredibly heavy in her hands. She met Nathaniel's gaze, the fear in her eyes slowly hardening into a fierce, unbreakable resolve. When do we start? She asked. Nathaniel Pierce smiled, a sharp, predatory curve of his lips. Tomorrow at 6 a.m., dress comfortably, Miss Bennett. Your old life is officially over. The sleek, unmarked black car arrived precisely at 5:55 a.m. every morning. For the next 12 days, Chloe Bennett existed in a grueling, disorienting purgatory between her old life of agonizing poverty and her new reality as Nathaniel Pierce's most vital asset. Her training facility was not a gleaming high-tech laboratory, but a cavernous, climate-controlled warehouse in the industrial district, stripped down and rebuilt to replicate the exact floor plan of the Grand Meridian Hotel's penthouse suites. Every corner, every blind spot, every security camera angle had been meticulously recreated. Nathaniel was a merciless instructor. He stripped away her instinct to apologize, a reflex ingrained by years of serving the wealthy. You are not sorry, Nathaniel snapped during her third day, watching her flinch as he intentionally knocked a crystal decanter off a table. It shattered, glass raining over Chloe's shoes. She had immediately dropped to her knees to clean it, murmuring apologies. Nathaniel hauled her to her feet, his grip firm but not bruising. "Look at me, Chloe. Why are you apologizing? You didn't drop the glass. I did. When you apologize for things that are not your fault, you signal weakness. You signal that you are prey. In Richard Sterling's world, prey gets eaten. It's a habit," Chloe breathed, her heart racing. "Break it," Nathaniel commanded, his icy grey eyes locking onto hers. "In that penthouse, you are an apparition. You do not speak unless addressed. You do not make eye contact unless absolutely necessary. But most importantly, you observe everything. The way a man taps his cigar, the documents left casually on a side table, the reflection of a laptop screen in a mirrored tray. Your waitressing skills, your balance, your ability to navigate crowded rooms silently, your spatial awareness. These are weapons now. Hone them." And hone them she did. Under the tutelage of Nathaniel's private security experts, Chloe learned how to palm a micro-audio transmitter while simultaneously pouring a seamless glass of Cabernet. She learned to read the subtle micro-expressions of men trying to hide their panic, and she memorized the schematics of the Grand Meridian's secure server rooms. The physical and mental exhaustion was overwhelming, but every evening, when she returned to her apartment, she was reminded of why she was enduring this trial. Harper was thriving. Nathaniel had been true to his word. Within 24 hours of Chloe signing the contract, a team of top-tier private neurologists had arrived at their door. Harper was now receiving state-of-the-art infusions at home, administered by a private nurse. The dark circles under her little sister's eyes were fading, replaced by a spark of life Chloe hadn't seen in years. Knowing Harper was safe and comfortable ignited a fierce, protective fire in Chloe's chest. She would walk through hell for Nathaniel Pierce if it meant keeping her sister smiling. On the 12th day of training, the timeline violently shattered. Chloe was practicing slipping a cloned keycard into an apron pocket when the warehouse doors burst open. Nathaniel walked in, his usual measured composure replaced by a tight, electric urgency. He bypassed the training supervisors and marched directly to Chloe. "We are out of time," he said abruptly, pulling up a secure feed on his tablet. "Richard Sterling just moved the timetable. He's hosting a private dinner in the penthouse tomorrow night." Chloe's stomach dropped. "Tomorrow? You said we had 3 more days. I haven't mastered the firewall bypass yet." "You won't need to bypass the firewall. The parameters have changed," Nathaniel explained, his jaw set. "Sterling is hosting a man named Grigory Volkov. He's an international facilitator, a shadow banker. If Sterling hands over the encrypted ledgers to Volkov tomorrow night, the Apex Syndicate's money gets washed through offshore accounts, and the trail disappears forever. Elias Montgomery died trying to find those ledgers. We have to intercept them." "How?" Chloe asked, wiping her sweaty palms on her dark trousers. "Sterling keeps the physical backup drive in a biometric safe in his private study, adjacent to the dining room," Nathaniel said, pulling up the blueprints. "Tomorrow night, Volkov will demand to see the proof of funds. Sterling will have to open that safe. We have a window of exactly 3 minutes while they are reviewing the files in the study." Nathaniel handed her a small, elegant silver serving tray. Embedded flawlessly into the ornate rim was a high-resolution microscopic camera and a short-range data skimmer. "You will serve the after-dinner scotch," Nathaniel instructed, his voice low and intense. "You will enter the study. You will set the tray down within 18 inches of Sterling's open laptop. The skimmer will clone the unencrypted data in 45 seconds. You must remain in the room, acting completely natural until the transfer is complete. Then you walk out." Chloe stared at the silver tray. It felt impossibly heavy. "And if I'm caught?" Nathaniel stepped closer, his imposing frame shielding her from the rest of the room. He reached out, his hand gently resting on her shoulder, a rare moment of physical contact that grounded her spiraling anxiety. "You are Chloe Bennet," he said softly, a fierce conviction burning in his eyes. "You survived the trenches of Laura. You survived Arthur Harrison. You survived a lifetime of the world telling you that you were nothing but background noise. Tomorrow night, you use their arrogance against them. They won't see you, Chloe, because to them, you are just a waitress." The air in the Grand Meridian's penthouse suite was thick with the scent of expensive cigars, roasted wagyu, and millions of dollars of dirty money changing hands. Chloe stood in the pristine, stainless steel catering kitchen attached to the suite, her hands resting flat against the cool marble counter to steady their trembling. She wore the stark, elegant uniform of Vanguard Hospitality's elite private staff, a tailored black blazer, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, immaculate twist. She looked like a ghost, designed to blend perfectly into the mahogany and shadows of the executive floor. An earpiece, no larger than a grain of rice and completely hidden deep within her ear canal, crackled to life. "Audio check, Echo 1. Do you copy?" Nathaniel's voice murmured in her ear, transmitting from a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away in a subterranean garage. Chloe tapped her collarbone twice, the designated signal for an affirmative read. She couldn't speak. The catering manager, a severe woman named Beatrice, was only a few feet away, barking orders at the prep cooks. "Sterling and Volkov have moved to the dining table," Nathaniel guided her. "Beatrice Sterling is present as well. Keep your head down, Chloe. Do not let her see your face, fully." A jolt of pure ice shot through Chloe's veins. Beatrice, of course she was here. If the socialite recognized her from the disastrous incident at Laura just 2 weeks prior, the entire operation would instantaneously collapse. Chloe took a deep, shuddering breath, locking her fear away in a dark mental box, just as Nathaniel had taught her. "Bennet!" the catering manager snapped, pointing to a silver cart loaded with the main courses under heavy cloches. "Table service. Now. And don't hover. Mr. Sterling despises hovering." Chloe nodded mutely. She gripped the handles of the cart and pushed it through the swinging doors, leaving the bright, chaotic kitchen for the dim, oppressive luxury of the dining room. The dining table was a massive slab of petrified wood, illuminated by a low-hanging chandelier. Richard Sterling sat at the head. He was a broad-shouldered man with a predatory smile and eyes that constantly darted around the room, evaluating threats. Across from him sat Volkov, a massive, silent man with a scarred neck, eating his food with mechanical precision. And there, seated to Richard's right, was Beatrice Sterling, dripping in diamonds, including, Chloe noted with a flash of dark irony, the very tennis bracelet she had been accused of stealing. Chloe moved with liquid grace, approaching the table from the blind spots, just as she had practiced 1,000 times. She kept her chin tucked, her gaze fixed entirely on the polished silverware. She served Volkov first, then Beatrice, moving behind the socialite's chair with a terrifying proximity. She could smell Beatrice's sickeningly sweet perfume. "Richard, the market in Dubai is completely volatile," Beatrice was complaining, aggressively cutting into a steak. She didn't even glance up as Chloe placed the plate before her. "We should be moving the assets to Geneva." "Let me handle the logistics, my dear," Richard replied smoothly, though his tone held a dangerous edge. "Mr. Volkov and I have an understanding." Chloe finished serving and melted back into the shadows near the wall, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had survived round 1. Beatrice hadn't looked at her once. To the wealthy, The help was simply an extension of the cutlery. For the next hour, Chloe stood practically motionless, listening to the horrifyingly casual way these people discussed ruining lives, bankrupting companies, and laundering illicit fortunes. It fueled the fire within her. "Stand by, Echo 1. Nathaniel's voice suddenly cut through the drone of the dinner conversation. "They are finishing their wine. Sterling is about to make the move to the study. Get the tray ready." Right on cue, Richard wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and stood up. "Grigori, if you would join me in the study, let us finalize the paperwork and review the ledgers." "Beatrice, excuse us." Volkov grunted in agreement and followed Richard toward heavy, double oak doors at the far end of the room. Chloe slipped back into the kitchen. She retrieved the modified silver tray, placing 2 crystal tumblers and a bottle of Macallan 25 on it. Her reflection warped in the silver surface, pale and tense. She pushed through the kitchen doors and walked purposefully toward the study. The heavy oak doors were ajar. Chloe slipped inside. The study was a testament to dark leather and ego. Richard Sterling was standing behind a massive desk, his thumb pressed against a biometric scanner hidden behind a framed painting. A heavy steel safe clicked open. Chloe approached the desk. "Your scotch, gentlemen," she murmured softly, keeping her voice entirely devoid of inflection. She stepped forward and set the tray down on the edge of the desk. She positioned it perfectly, exactly 14 inches from where Richard had just set down a sleek, black, encrypted laptop. "Tray is in position," Nathaniel's voice whispered in her ear. "Initiating data handshake. 45 seconds, Chloe. Do not move the tray." Richard poured the drinks, handing one to Volkov. He sat down and opened the laptop, typing in a rapid-fire password. The screen illuminated, casting a harsh blue light over his harsh features. "Here is the proof of liquidity," Richard said, turning the laptop slightly toward Volkov. "Connection established," Nathaniel reported, his voice tight with concentration. "Downloading. 30 seconds." Chloe stood to the side, her hands clasped behind her back in the standard rest position. She stared at the far wall, counting the agonizing seconds in her head. 1, 2, 3. "Hold on," Volkov said suddenly, his thick accent breaking the silence. He squinted at the screen, then looked up, his gaze sweeping the room. His eyes landed on the tray, then slowly traveled up to Chloe's face. "Why is she still here?" Volkov demanded, his voice a low, threatening rumble. Richard frowned, turning to look at Chloe, as if just realizing she occupied space in the room. "You can leave," he snapped dismissively. "Download at 70%, Nathaniel warned urgently. "Stall, Chloe. 10 more seconds. If she picked up the tray now, the connection would sever. The data would be corrupted. Everything would be for nothing." Chloe's mind raced. She couldn't ignore a direct order to leave. She had to create a distraction. With calculated clumsiness, Chloe unclasped her hands and reached forward as if to adjust the bottle of scotch. As her fingers brushed the heavy glass, she allowed her wrist to give out entirely. The bottle tipped. It didn't shatter, but it slammed heavily onto the wood of the desk, spilling a quarter of the priceless amber liquid across the polished surface, inches from the laptop. "You clumsy idiot!" Richard roared, leaping out of his leather chair as the scotch pooled toward his trousers. "I am so sorry, sir," Chloe gasped, instantly grabbing a cloth from her apron and lunging forward to mop up the spill. Her hands moved frantically, purposefully wiping around the silver tray, keeping it rooted exactly where it was. Volkov let out a harsh bark of laughter at Richard's expense. "Download complete," Nathaniel's voice echoed in her ear, accompanied by a heavy exhale of relief. "Get out of there. Now." Chloe finished swiping at the spill, her head bowed in profound submission. "I will fetch a proper towel, sir. Please excuse me." She grabbed the silver tray, the payload secured, and turned toward the door, but as she reached the threshold, a massive figure stepped into the doorframe, blocking her exit entirely. It was Dominic, Sterling's ruthless head of security. He was a mountain of a man with dead, vacant eyes. He stared down at Chloe, then looked past her, at the spilled scotch, and finally at the silver tray in her hands. He didn't move. He just stared at her, his eyes narrowing in cold, calculating suspicion. "Wait," Dominic said, his voice like grinding stones. He reached out, his massive hand clamping down like a vice on Chloe's shoulder. "I've seen you before." The silence in the study was suffocating. Dominic's hand felt like a lead weight pressing into Chloe's collarbone. His dead, shark-like eyes scanned her face, dissecting her features. "I've seen you before," Dominic repeated, his thick fingers tightening ever so slightly. "A couple of weeks ago. You're the girl from Laura. The one who spilled the bisque on Mrs. Sterling." Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at Chloe's throat. If he dragged her back into the dining room, Beatrice would instantly confirm her identity. They would search her. They would find the hidden skimmer. Nathaniel's voice in her earpiece was dead silent. He was listening, waiting to see if his operative would break or adapt. Chloe remembered Nathaniel's brutal training sessions. They expect you to be weak. Use their expectations against them. Instantly, Chloe let her shoulders slump. She widened her eyes, forcing a tremor into her lower lip, and let out a pathetic, stifled sob. "Please," she whimpered, her voice cracking perfectly. "Please don't tell Mrs. Sterling. Mr. Harrison fired me that night, but I begged the agency for this catering shift. I didn't know it was her suite. If she sees me, she'll have me blacklisted from every agency in the city." She let a single tear spill over her lashes, clutching the silver tray to her chest as if it were a shield. "I have a sick sister. I'll leave right now, I promise. Just please don't let her see me." Dominic's suspicious glare faltered, replaced by a flicker of profound disgust. Men like him respected power and violence. They loathed weeping, pathetic weakness. Richard Sterling, who was still frantically trying to dab the spilled scotch off his trousers with a cocktail napkin, shot a furious glare toward the doorway. "Dominic, what is the hold-up? Get this blubbering, clumsy mess out of my penthouse before she breaks something else." "She's a liability, boss," Dominic grunted. "She's an idiot," Richard snapped. "Throw her out. Tell Beatrice's catering manager to dock her pay for the entire evening. Now, Grigori, look here at the offshore routing numbers." Dominic released Chloe's shoulder with a rough shove, propelling her into the hallway. "You heard him? Take the service elevator down to the loading dock. If I see your face on this floor again, I'll throw you off the balcony myself." "Thank you." "Thank you so much," Chloe babbled, keeping her head bowed submissively as she practically sprinted toward the kitchen. She pushed through the swinging doors, bypassing the chaotic prep stations. Beatrice, the catering manager, yelled something at her, but Chloe ignored her, moving with single-minded purpose toward the heavy metal doors of the service corridor. She hit the button for the service elevator. It lit up, but the digital display showed the car was on the ground floor, 80 stories down. "Brilliant improvisation, Echo 1. Nathaniel's voice finally crackled in her ear, laced with a rare thread of genuine relief. "But you need to move. I'm monitoring the hotel's internal network. Volkov's tech team is running a routine sweep of Sterling's laptop right now." Chloe clutched the tray. "How long do I have?" she whispered to the empty hallway. 60 seconds before they detect the unauthorized data duplication," Nathaniel replied, his voice tightening. "Take the stairs. Do not wait for the elevator." Chloe didn't hesitate. She threw open the heavy fire door to the stairwell and began to descend, her sensible black uniform shoes echoing harshly against the concrete. She had made it down 3 flights when the piercing wail of the hotel's internal security alarm shattered the quiet. The stairwell was instantly bathed in the harsh, rotating red glare of emergency strobes. "They found it!" Nathaniel commanded, his voice sharp and authoritative, cutting through the blaring sirens. "Sterling has initiated a full lockdown of the executive floors. Dominic is likely mobilizing his men to sweep the building. You have a 3-minute head start. Ditch the tray, keep the drive." While running down the stairs, Chloe flipped the silver tray over. Her fingers found the microscopic seam along the rim. With a hard twist, she popped the hidden compartment open and extracted a data drive no larger than a piece of chewing gum. She shoved it deep into her trouser pocket and tossed the expensive silver tray over the railing. It plummeted down the center of the stairwell, clattering violently into the darkness. She stripped off her blazer and silk tie, tossing them aside to break up her visual profile. Now in just a white button-down and black trousers, she looked like any low-level office worker working late. "I'm on floor 72, Chloe gasped, her lungs burning as she descended another flight. "They'll catch up if I keep taking the stairs." "Exit onto floor 70, Nathaniel instructed smoothly, his fingers audibly flying across a keyboard in the surveillance van. "It's a corporate suites level, currently empty for renovations. I am overriding their electronic locks now. Head for the freight elevator on the north end." Chloe burst out of the stairwell onto the 70th floor. It was a labyrinth of plastic sheeting, exposed drywall, and construction materials. She sprinted down the corridor, dodging scaffolding. Heavy boots slammed against the fire door she had just exited. Dominic's men were already on the floor. "Spread out!" A rough voice echoed down the unfinished hallway. "Lock down the elevators!" Chloe ducked behind a massive stack of drywall, her chest heaving. She was trapped. The freight elevator was still 30 yards away, across a wide-open expanse of concrete flooring. "They are blocking the north corridor," Nathaniel's voice warned, a hard edge of tension bleeding through his usual calm. "Chloe, listen to me. Above you. The HVAC ventilation shafts are exposed because of the renovation. Can you reach them?" Chloe looked up. 10 feet above her, a massive, rectangular aluminum duct ran parallel to the ceiling. A rolling construction scaffold sat parked just beneath it. "Yes," she whispered back. With adrenaline flooding her system, she scrambled up the metal framing of the scaffold. The alarm sirens masked the metallic clatter of her movements. She reached the top, grabbing the edge of the ductwork and heaving her body weight up. She pulled herself flat against the cold aluminum, just as 2 armed security guards jogged past the drywall stack below her. They swept the area with high-powered flashlights, the beams cutting through the construction dust, missing her by inches. "Clear!" one of them shouted, moving toward the south exit. Chloe lay trembling against the metal, clutching the tiny drive in her pocket. She had just outsmarted trained killers. She was no longer just surviving. She was executing. "The coast is temporarily clear," Nathaniel guided her. "Crawl 20 yards east. It will drop you into the mechanical room of the adjacent high-rise. We own that building. I have a team waiting." 30 minutes later, the rain was coming down in sheets as Chloe stepped out of a private access tunnel into the subterranean garage of the Vanguard building. She was covered in construction dust, her white shirt stained with grease from the ventilation shafts, and she was physically exhausted. But as she saw Nathaniel Pierce leaning against the hood of the black Maybach, surrounded by a team of heavily armed Vanguard security personnel, she felt an electrifying surge of triumph. Nathaniel stepped forward, his grey eyes sweeping over her disheveled appearance. A slow, deeply impressed smile spread across his face. "You look terrible, Miss Bennett," he said softly. Chloe reached into her pocket, pulled out the tiny data drive, and held it out to him. "I believe this belongs to you." Nathaniel took the drive, his hand brushing hers. Elias Montgomery's legacy and Richard Sterling's downfall, "You did perfectly, Chloe." He handed the drive to a waiting technician who immediately plugged it into a heavily encrypted mobile terminal on the hood of the car. Lines of code blurred across the screen as the decryption software went to work. "It will take a few minutes to pass the ledgers," Nathaniel said, opening the door of the Maybach for her. "Sit. Rest. It's over." Chloe sank into the plush leather, her adrenaline finally crashing. "What happens now?" "Now, we forward these unencrypted ledgers to my contacts at the SEC and Interpol," Nathaniel explained, leaning against the open doorframe. "By sunrise, Richard Sterling will be in federal custody for racketeering, money laundering, and likely the murder of my partner." "Sir," the technician interrupted, his voice tight with alarm. "The decryption is finished, but wuti totuk." "You need to see this." Nathaniel frowned, moving to the terminal. Chloe, driven by a newfound confidence, climbed out of the car and stood beside him. On the screen were dozens of scanned documents, wire transfer receipts, and offshore holding company structures. But there, emblazoned on the most sensitive, high-level authorization forms, including the transfer that had funded the hitman who killed Elias Montgomery, was a signature. It wasn't Richard Sterling's. It was a sharp, aggressive, flowing script. Beatrice Sterling. Nathaniel stared at the screen, a cold realization washing over his features. "It wasn't Richard," he whispered. "Richard was just the loud, arrogant front man. He handled the domestic real estate." "Beatrice ran the international syndicate," Chloe finished, her mind flashing back to the dinner table. "Richard, the market in Dubai is completely volatile. We should be moving the assets to Geneva." She hadn't been a nagging wife complaining about investments. She had been giving orders to her subordinate. "The clumsy socialite routine," Nathaniel said, a dark mix of fury and awe in his voice. She played the vain, volatile trophy wife to perfection. It made everyone underestimate her. It made me underestimate her. She was the architect the entire time. "She threw the soup bowl on purpose that night at Laura," Chloe realized out loud, the puzzle pieces violently snapping together. Not because she was drunk or angry. She did it to create a massive, distracting public scene because she needed an excuse to leave the restaurant immediately without drawing suspicion. She was probably about to be caught meeting with a courier. Nathaniel looked at Chloe, his eyes blazing with a fierce, absolute respect. And because she made you the collateral damage of that distraction, she inadvertently created the weapon that just destroyed her empire. He turned to the technician. "Package everything. Flag Beatrice Sterling as the primary target for Interpol. I want her arrested before she can board her private jet to Geneva." By 6 a.m., the city awoke to chaos. News helicopters circled the Grand Meridian Hotel. Breaking news alerts flashed across every television screen, detailing the massive raid on the Apex Syndicate. Footage played of Richard Sterling, looking stunned and haggard, being led out in handcuffs. But the image that dominated the front pages was of Beatrice Sterling. She was photographed being escorted by federal agents out of a private hangar, her flawless makeup ruined, her expression twisted into a mask of pure, venomous fury. The untouchable queen of the city's elite had fallen. Later that afternoon, Chloe walked into the pristine, glass-walled executive suite at the top of the Vanguard Tower. She wore a perfectly tailored suit provided by Nathaniel's team. She looked nothing like the terrified waitress who had cowered under a rain of shattered porcelain just weeks ago. Nathaniel was sitting behind a massive oak desk, poring over a tablet. He looked up as she entered, standing immediately. "The doctor's report that Harper responded beautifully to her treatment this morning," Nathaniel said, without preamble, knowing exactly what she cared about most. Chloe felt a profound, overwhelming weight lift from her chest. "Thank you," for everything. "You earned it, Chloe," Nathaniel said, walking around the desk. He picked up a sleek, black leather portfolio and handed it to her. "The Apex Syndicate is dismantled. Vanguard is now the undisputed leader in this sector. But my operations require a director of intelligence, someone who sees the details everyone else ignores, someone who understands how the invisible gears of this city truly turn." Chloe looked down at the portfolio. It was an employment contract, offering a position with power, autonomy, and security she had never dreamed possible. She looked up at Nathaniel Pierce, no longer afraid of the icy calculation in his eyes. She understood it now. She shared it. "When do we start?" she asked, a fierce, confident smile playing on her lips. Nathaniel returned the smile. "We already have." The rain that had washed the city streets weeks ago now felt like a distant memory. Chloe Bennett stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new executive office, looking down at the glittering skyline that no longer intimidated her. She had walked into the Vanguard Hospitality Group as a desperate, broken waitress, clutching her sister's medical bills like a death sentence. She emerged as a ghost, a phantom operative who had single-handedly dismantled the city's most untouchable criminal syndicate. Beatrice and Richard Sterling were currently sitting in federal holding cells, their stolen empire seized, their arrogance shattered. More importantly, Harper was laughing again, her medical care secured for life. Chloe touched the cool silver of her discreet earpiece, feeling a quiet, terrifying thrill. She was no longer just surviving the world of the elite. She was commanding it. The invisible girl had become the architect,